Hey everyone, it's Chad from the Teach Better team, and I'm here with the amazing Maggie Gifford. And tonight we are going to be building an elementary reading grid live for you. So let's go. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, Maggie. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Excited, a little bit nervous about doing this live, but
That's
excited.
okay. We got plenty of people that are here to support you. So let's make sure we're showing Maggie some love in the comments because she's doing what you've seen a couple people do already. Maybe this is your first time, but we are going to be building a grid live. We're going to be building a grid for Maggie in her classroom with her. It's a very vulnerable thing. It's kind of scary. She's putting herself out there. So let's fill up those comments with some green hearts and show her some love because this is just absolutely amazing. But I have to tell you, Maggie, I've actually worked with you for quite some time. We've done workshops together. We've helped teachers together. So I have no doubt that our audience and everyone's going to get so much value from hearing you walk through you designing a grid. So could we tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you teach, what grade level you teach, and just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Maggie Gifford. I am currently a first grade teacher in Southeast Ohio. This is year 18 for me. And in those 18 years, I've taught special education, third grade, second grade, and this is the second time I've been in first. I'm actually teaching my daughter's class this year, so I'm excited about that. I've been connected with the Teach Better team for a few years now, thanks to Chad and the Grid Method. And I'm a Teach Better ambassador, a guest blogger, lots of hats.
So I just want to highlight one thing. This has the endorsement of a teacher/parent for their own child in the classroom. Mind blown. That's like probably the best endorsement I could have ever asked for, right? Because that's pretty cool. So that means a lot to me just in my heart personally. I truly appreciate that. So we are going to be diving into a grid. Maggie teaches first grade. So I think this is really cool because a lot of people, Maggie, they're like, I don't know if this is going to work for first graders. And whenever they tell me that, I go, you got to go talk to Maggie. You got to go talk to Amanda. You got to talk to the other amazing teachers I work with every single day because you guys do a great job and you do an amazing job with this every single day with your kids, which I've seen in your classroom in person, pre-COVID. I was able to see some amazing things. So we are going to get into this grid. This is a first grade reading grid. Do you want to, before I kind of put it up there on the screen, do you want to kind of give us a heads up about some context or thoughts about this grid?
Yeah, we are. So I'm looking into my third and fourth 9 weeks curriculum map for our standards. And so we're really heading into informational text and looking at main topic, text features, all of your basic informational text standards. We're also getting into informational text writing. So those are going to go hand in hand. I will say we are a balanced literacy district. So
Nice.
when I build my grids, I have to build them for literacy. I have to build them from the ground up because I don't have any curriculum to base it off of. So, yeah, that's kind of the context of this is information.
All right. Okay, so Maggie and I are both sitting here into this grid here in a minute. So Maggie, I'm going to let you do the typing into the grid, and I'll do the kind of verbal walkthrough, and we can kind of start having this conversation. So the first thing I want to do is discuss sort of the topics in what DOK level we think some of these standards are going to be. But one note that I want to give everybody, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and you've heard me say this to teachers before, Maggie, when it comes to general literacy skills, I usually don't recommend that teachers make a whole grid on something like citing textual evidence or identifying a main topic at older grade levels. And the reason I usually don't recommend that is because students should be asked to do that on every grid. So focusing an entire grid on that might not make sense in an 8th grade class or a 6th grade class or a 5th grade class. However, when you get to primary grades, this is sort of the one exception, because you correct me if I'm wrong, for some of these standards, it might be the first time your first graders are ever experiencing it. So you need to teach it as a new concept, which means, to me at least, it makes perfect sense to have a whole grid really focused on these types of skills. Is that kind of your thinking? I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of my topics, a lot of my standards, they've seen in kindergarten, but everything is with prompting. So in kindergarten, they will have done it, but it's through read alouds and with teacher prompting. So when they get to me, this is really the first time that they're going to be expected to not only know how to do it, but know how to do it independently. And so, I think that especially that main topic and the key details and text features, this is the first time that they will really have been exposed to it in this type of setting.
Absolutely. So I love that context. I just wanted our audience to have that context, because I think that's super important, that it's okay to focus on this because they need this skill. They need to build this for the first time, and this ability to do it independently is super important. So let's take a look at some of these standards. I will try to blow this up a little bit so everyone can see. Give me 1 minute. I think that's probably as big as I can get it there. But the first standard is analyze informational text, identifying the main topic and retelling key details. Now, I think there's multiple DOK levels going on here. I don't know where your head's at, but analyzing in general is usually level 2, level 3, depending on what the analysis is, right? Mm-hmm. But identifying a main topic to me is pretty basic. Would you agree? To me, that's more of like DOK level 1. What was this story about? Just point to it. Tell me, what was this story about? Retelling a story, though, or retelling key details could be anywhere from DOK 1, if you're just telling them to identify things, to retelling multiple aspects or explaining why something's happening in a story. That could be DOK level 2 for me. Would you agree with those sort of DOK level assessments, or am I off at all?
No, I agree with you. I originally just put this in DOK 1 because it's just very straightforward, identify and retell. But I agree that when we start moving up the levels, we can start maybe expecting more of that analyze feature as opposed to just retell.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think analyze and retell key details could be both in level 1. Absolutely. However, sorry, my computer's beeping. However, I think you can also do those things at higher levels. So, for example, retelling the name of the main character that you just read, retelling the name of the character that you just read could be a simple DOK level 1. However, telling why something happened in a story could make it a higher level. Does that make sense? So, like, explain why something happened in the story as a key detail could be a level 2 instead of a level 1. So I think there's multiple levels here to deal with. So let's go to the next 1.3, where it says, describe the connection between two individuals, events, ideas, or pieces of information in the text. I really like this one. What DOK level do you think that's falling at, Maggie?
So I actually thought that was a DOK 3.
Okay.
The reason I actually added this standard in kind of at the very end, because when I was working through my targets, I got to DOK 3, level 3, and I didn't really have a good grasp on, I knew there needed to be like that compare, that contrast element to it.
Sure.
But in third grade, I also want to be very aware in first grade that there is a level that might be a little too deep for them at this point.
Sure.
But
they're still learning how to read in some cases,
right,
with the code. Absolutely. Yeah.
But I felt like this standard, I could take that compare and contrast, analyze element and fit that with this standard.
I agree. I think that was a good call, and I think that's a good extension, describing the connections between multiple things, events, or pieces of informational text. So, like that, I love that you included that, because now you can say, what happened in this story compared to this story, and this is a really, really great. This is a really, really great example of a higher level DOK, but in the context of like an elementary standard, because a student describing connections between two separate texts is still comparative analysis. It's still a higher level DOK standard. And I say this all the time, you can have higher standards even with like first grade, kindergarten, second grade standards. And it's not about the complexity of like the topic. It's literally the complexity of the thinking that's happening. So I really, really like that. And I'm glad you included it in here. So do you want to read the next one for us?
Yeah, it's know and use various text features, which are headings, tables of contents, glossaries, electronic menus, icons, to locate key facts and information in a text.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on this one?
I think this one is also multiple DOK levels. I think the know is probably a DOK 1, because it does have to identify it, but then to be able to use it is going to go to DOK 2. And then I think when we get into that connection between the two pieces of information, that's going to bump the text features up to even a DOK 3, because we'll pull from those as well.
I would also, if I'm getting super picky about this, the term use could indicate the creation of something by the student, right? So if the student is creating a story with these features, you could even bump parts of this all the way up to that DOK level 4, depending on what you're looking for them to do. So I love that. And I think we can weave that standard through multiple levels on the grid very, very easily. Very, very easily. So what are we thinking about asking and answering questions about details in the text? This seems kind of broad to me, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
It is really broad. I included that one because it's one of those standards that we do all year long. And no matter what unit we're talking about, what story we're talking about, we are weaving this standard within it. So that's kind of one of those, I kind of think of it as like a background standard, because when I do all of those other things, I'm hitting that standard.
I love that you just brought this up. And this is one of my favorite things because sometimes teachers will ask me, and you've heard them ask these questions when we do trainings and things together. They go, how do I cover all of my standards if I'm only covering a couple per grid? And something I often tell them is, if I'm a social studies teacher, something like mapping skills is going to be done in every single unit I do. So I'm going to have that standard on every grid that I do. This is another one of those skill-focused standards where you're going to be having them ask and answer questions about texts all year. So they don't have to master it fully by the end of this grid, but we're still covering it partially. So this is what I would call a secondary focus of the grid. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
So it's going to be part of what we do in the grid. It's going to be covered, but it's not expected that, they can answer any question about any text in the history of the English language, because we're going to be practicing this skill all year. And some of these texts are really specific to the informational text category. So those would be what I would call our focus standards. So just to kind of rewind and cover like what I just said, the first three standards listed are going to be our focus standards. The last one, RI 1.1, ask and answer questions about key details, is what I would call a secondary focus of this grid, or a secondary standard, or a spiraling standard that we're going to be using across the entire year. Other examples of things like this would be things like map skills or timeline skills in a social studies classroom, or using proper symbols and things like that in a math classroom, or showing work in a math classroom if that's part of your standard. You're going to do that in every single aspect. Things like utilizing the scientific method in a science class would be a spiraling standard, because you're going to do that in all of your units if you teach science, right? Regardless of the grade level. So I love that you added that in there. So the next step, as you know, we kind of have our DOK levels. I think they scaffold really nicely, is developing our learning objectives or targets for our students. So I'm going to go back over to this tab here, and we are going to start working through some of these targets. So are you ready to do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's look at level 1. Make sure everyone can see it. I think that looks pretty good. So level 1, do you want to read through those targets and kind of talk us through what you're thinking so far, since you've already been awesome enough to start putting some things on your grid, which is great.
It's really hard for me to leave a blank grid. I have to plug stuff in.
You don't know how much I actually understand what you mean by that. Like, I totally viscerally understand that. So it's okay.
So level 1, I can identify the main topic of an informational text. I can retell key details of a text, and I can identify headings, tables of contents, glossaries, electronic menus, and icons. Okay,
so I really like that you've hit multiple standards on this first level, but just at their basic level, right? Yeah. I think you've hit most of the focus standards that we just talked about. Other than maybe, and even like the retelling key details, right? I absolutely love that you kind of covered all of them on level 1. So a couple notes I want everyone to understand. You can have more than one target on a level in your grid, and you can cover more than one standard on a grid. These are common misconceptions for whatever reason, that people think that they can only cover sort of one thing on a level or one standard on a grid, but you're very beautifully demonstrating right now to our entire audience that you can cover more than one thing, and you can cover multiple targets and objectives in a given level of the grid. Those all look really solid DOK level 1 things to me. I think that's a good amount of information to cover in a level. It might be a little heavy, but I think you can kind of probably cross and cover multiple pieces of that. like together. And that's another thing that I want to kind of address here when we get to planning what goes into that level. But I feel pretty good about level 1 already. I really don't have a whole lot of suggestions to change. So Maggie, like, you could just give yourself a gold star for level 1 because nice work. Like that's pretty solid. That's pretty solid.
But can I say something about level 1 too?
Yeah, do it.
This is so for anybody who's higher than first grade is really like the foundation. So I didn't deal with this, but last year when I did the second grade ones, we found that students were coming in without maybe all of the background knowledge and foundation that they needed. So we would use this level 1 as a really great place for background knowledge that maybe they didn't get the previous year.
I love it.
So that's something else to think about with level 1 that we learned the hard way.
Yeah. Absolutely. So if you're going to start closing some of those previous grade level gaps, that first level is the place to do it, right? I've even had some teachers create a level 0 on their grid. So they will pre-assess their students before they start a unit. This is most common for me with math teachers, but I've seen other teachers do it. But what they'll do is they'll say, these are required skills to approach the grade level standard, right? So you pre-assess your students, and anyone who shows mastery of those basic standards starts on level 1, where if you don't have those basic prior grade level standards or kindergarten standards in your case, right? If you don't have those, you would then start them at level 0. But you can also easily, as you're saying, incorporate that, intertwine it in your level 1. Just be aware of where those segregations are so that when you're assessing, especially if you're in a standards-based school, you know that you're assessing them on grade level, so you're measuring against that properly. That'd be the only sort of like note I would give, right? If you're mixing in prior grade level standards and you're in a standards-based sort of grading system, make sure that you're grading on the current grade level standard, or include those prior grade level standards in your reporting in a way that's accurately reflecting their current grade level mastery. So that's just me being super picky about grading practices, I guess. But I don't necessarily want to open up that whole can of worms. So let's go to level 2. I'm really glad you said that, because I think a lot of teachers are like, well, what if I need to review stuff, right? You can do that either in the grid. Some teachers just do a review session before a unit 2, like that's okay too. But you have options. This isn't like a one way to do it sort of deal. You can do a lot of things in a lot of ways. So I love that you just helped articulate that. So here's another. We got 2 targets for level 2. Do you want to read them and kind of discuss?
Yeah, I can answer questions about key details in the text, and I can use text features to locate information. So my thinking on this is if they master identifying the main topic and retelling key details, then in level 2, they should be able to start using that information to answer questions and then pulling from text features in order to answer those questions.
Right, because now you're asking them, based on the title or heading or menu, what do you know about this text? So they're applying that identification of those features. So utilizing, applying, causing things to happen with the knowledge we have. I love that. DOK level 2 all day. Answering basic questions about details in the text. I could get super picky and go, what type of questions? I could ask a really, really hard question about a text, right? Like if I went to a student and said, can you compare and contrast, how would you compare this text to another text in the author's viewpoint? That's clearly a DOK level 3 tasks. So is there a quantifiable thing we can say to make this more targeted? I can answer what type of questions are you usually going to be asking students at this point about the text?
Probably just literal questions.
So Yeah. So like maybe I can answer literal questions about the text, or maybe fundamental questions, or like main questions, important questions about the text. But as long as I think literal makes sense, right? So not abstract thinking or anything like that. I was thinking like a first grader might not know what literal means.
If we're going to be honest, they're not going to know what a lot of these words mean.
That's true. So this is, yeah.
It's a good opportunity for me to kind of teach that, because as they get into upper grades, they're going to need to know the difference. And so this is a good place to lay that foundation.
So that was an amazing little segue into the implementation of this, right? So when you need your students to understand the objectives that they're working towards. So spending some of that time talking about those objectives, maybe having them write goals or talking about goals and objectives and targets and things like that can be really powerful, right? And that can be really, really useful. So I really like this. It was a small tweak, but I think it's an important one because now we're really targeting in on, I just need you to know, tell me a fact about the story, or answer a question about the character name or what happened, or this or that. We're not really talking about abstract thoughts or comparative analysis of characters or events and things like that. So I feel much better about this, even though we only changed one word.
Right.
Oh, so I love this. Right there questions.
Mm-hmm. I do like
really,
that.
really like that. Daphne for the win over here. And that'd be a really thing. That'd be a really great thing to kind of talk to your students. I would even in parentheses put right there, literal right there questions. Because I think we can use it as a teachable moment, right? And Calissa Brogdon is talking about, and she has older students, but still a great point. Having them restate their learning targets in their own words is also a great way to build that in. So just so everyone's aware, if this is the first time you're hearing about the grid method, we talk about targets and goal setting and restating learning objectives. We talk about a lot of that stuff that principals probably talk about too, that they come in, they want you to have your targets written on the board. But the truth is those can be really powerful aspects of instruction if they're implemented properly. When those aren't important to the teacher, they lose their value to the student, right? But if we spend the time to make targets and objectives that we know meet the needs of the standard, like me and Maggie are doing right now, it becomes more important to Maggie. So it's going to be more important to her students because they're going to, I've seen Maggie teach. They talk about this stuff on a daily basis. So when Maggie's principal comes in and goes, what's your learning target? Her kids can tell you what they're learning and what they're focused on because it's what they do every single day. Sorry if I'm speaking for you, but I get so excited when I get to talk about your classroom.
No, you're right. And it also, another thing that helps me do is it helps me understand my standard better. It really makes me dig in and really focus on what they have to do. Whereas maybe I would have skimmed over it before.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's honestly, as teachers, I think that's a normal gut reaction to standards, right? We go, okay, informational text, I have a unit on that. Cool, I'm going to roll with it. Right? If you're a non-grid method teacher, you might just go, oh, this is my informational text unit. I don't need to go through the details. I'm just going to roll with this unit because I know how to cover that and teach that. Whereas standards change all the time, and sometimes they ask for slightly different things. So being acutely aware of those things can be a really powerful tool. It can save you time. It can make you more efficient as a teacher, and it can really dig down and make you focus on what you need your kids to do. And that's what we see. I know you've had a lot of success with the grid method, but that's what we see in classrooms across the country. When teachers start knowing where they need their kids to go, their kids get there more efficiently, right? And it seems really basic, but this can help that process. Level 3, you want to go through level 3?
Yeah, I can compare two pieces of information and describe the connection using key details and text features.
Ooh,
and so
beautiful.
that is heavy, but I feel like it takes everything that they've done in level 1 and 2, and like now you have to put it together. Now you have to take all those skills and strategies and kind of put it together.
And to remind everybody, this is a separate standard that is in your in your expectations for students to be able to do. So giving them the opportunity early on to be able to demonstrate mastery of this standard or practice this standard is absolutely crucial, right? So this is really, really important that, and something I want to address. So if a student finishes levels 1 and level 2, they've actually mastered most of the standards that we talked about already, right? They may not have started this standard, but we know this is a higher level standard that they may need additional practice on. So this is probably something that you're going to do more of with them later again at some point as well, probably, right?
Right.
So just I want to give people context for kind of how this is playing out. So essentially, if a student finishes level 1 and level 2 and they master those standards, they've covered a good bit of the standards we need them to know for this particular unit. Would that make sense?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love that level 3 target. I honestly wouldn't change it. I think it's simple enough for your first graders. And I think that you're describing what I love about the way you craft targets so far as we talk about this, and this is probably the most in-depth we've ever talked about you making grids, but but at least under a microscope like this, right? But one of the things I love about them is I can measure that. I can measure that statement, right? I can have a student compare two pieces of information and connect them using key details, text features, and those are specific verbal questions I can ask the student, written questions I can ask the student, or Google digital questions I can ask the student, depending on how you're sort of assessing that student understanding. So here's something important about targets that Maggie has been doing a beautiful job at. So great job. I'm going to tell you what you're doing a great job at. She's creating general statements that are measurable that she can then assess directly with questioning of her students. What we wouldn't want is if Maggie said, I can compare Pinocchio to Beauty and the Beast, right? Like that's a super specific thing and it's not a skill, it's asking a specific question. Now, they might be comparing Pinocchio and Beauty and the Beast, right? But that's not the skill that I'm focused on. This is the same for every grade level we talk to, Maggie. And I know you hear me say this a lot. You're never teaching when you're talking about reading, whether it's first grade or 12th grade, you're never teaching a story. You're teaching students how to analyze and read and contextualize a story. And that's what you're doing a great job of here so far on your grid. So nice work.
Thanks.
All right. Are you ready to go to level 4?
Yes.
So to me, I didn't remember us talking about any DOK level 4 stuff other than maybe the using of the different things like potentially writing. So like to me, level 4 might even be a little bit of icing if a student gets here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so let's hear your thoughts on your level 4.
Okay, so my target is I can ask questions about informational text using key details and information and text features. So I have the standard. I think it goes through every grade level, ask and answer questions about the grade appropriate text or whatever. So I felt like they can really answer questions, by the time they get to this level, they're pretty good about answering them, but asking them when they have to ask them, that creates like a whole new thought process, requires a whole new thought process. So I kind of felt like when I'm asking them to create their own questions, that would bump it up to a DOK 4.
Yeah. So I think I can create, write, ask questions. Those could be DOK level 4. What about I'm just going to throw this idea out here, and you can tell me if I'm crazy or not, because you know how to teach first grade better than I do. Okay. So full transparency. I'm just going to throw this idea out there. Let me know if I'm being just crazy or not. Okay. Would they be able to write a simple piece of informational text using the key details and information, or is that going to be beyond their level?
No, actually, that's funny you said that, because I actually went back and forth on whether I should include that into as a piece of this grid, because we're working on informational writing at the same time as we're working on informational text. Okay. And so in our informational writing, I actually am going to ask them to create like a table of contents and to put labels on their pictures. So yeah, I mean, I think that absolutely that could be level 4.
I think them creating a really simple, like almost, even if it's like a note card or like a really simple, like create a piece of informational text about your favorite thing. Could be about your parent or your favorite video game or your favorite book or your favorite pet. You know what I mean? Like, but it could have to include certain aspects. So I think that could be a second target, or I think that could be an all-inclusive target either way.
Okay, so I can create, how did you put that?
I can create, now you're putting me on the spot. Hold on. I can create an informational text using key details and text features from a topic of my choosing, or based on a topic of my choosing, or something like that.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
I think that's a really good addition to it. And I think that's a really good kind of next step for them.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
What do you think about keeping that asking questions? Because it is part of our standard.
Yeah. So I think we can, let me think about this. You can have them ask questions about the informational text they're creating as well. So like the first part of level 4, and now we're getting into what's in level 4, but in my head, I'm almost wondering, do we have them look at an exemplar informational text that's going to be like what they create, ask questions about that? Like, how did they describe the item? What did they use? Right. Like, or what, like, come up with questions that you could ask about an exemplar or something like that. And that could be the first step in them doing their creative process. Does that make sense?
So like a mentor text that we would use for like our writing workshop, then we could take that mentor text and they could ask questions based off the mentor text and then apply that to their own writing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now this is like pretty high level stuff, but like, I love that, because this is just once again proof that first graders can do that if it's scaffolded properly. And that's something that I think you do a great job of. I'm going to brag on you for a second. But you do an amazing job of just scaffolding these skills, so that I can tell you right now, I've talked to first graders that if you read them that, they'd be like, no way my kids can't do that. And I'm not saying that like, and that's my least favorite phrase in the teacher language. My kids can't. Anything after that, I'm not listening anymore. Stop it. Okay. Your kids can. I got excited for a second. Sorry. Your kids can, if you scaffold it properly, if you scaffold the questioning and the assignments and the tasks properly, using appropriate DOK. Now, you can probably tell me right now, if you just handed this to your students on day one and said, write an informational text using XYZ, they're going to look at like you got bugs crawling out of your ears, right?
Right.
Like they're going to have no idea. But at the end of this grid, they're going to know exactly what you're asking. And yeah, it's going to be pushing them a little bit, right?
Mhm.
But guess what,
Right.
everyone? That's when learning happens. So that's super exciting. And I'm really excited that we added that. So great job.
Yeah, I'm
All right.
excited about that. Yeah.
So any ideas for level 5, or do you want to include a level 5 on this grid?
And then the wheels fell off. There's no level 5.
Do you not want a level 5? We don't, I mean, like, I'm okay if
Well,
we.
I'm going to be honest. I think when we added in that writing piece, I feel like that's almost going to encompass 4 and 5 together.
So what if 4 is the development of the initial draft of that? And what if level 5 is I can publish my informational text for public consumption? So what if I can create and I'm sorry, my brain, I drove a lot today. I can create a final publishable product based on feedback I receive on my informational text. So like maybe at the end of level 4, you give them some feedback and you say, okay, now we got to polish it up. We got to make it look pretty and make, you know what I mean? And make it look publishable to either put up in the wall or maybe even digitally post on your Google Classroom or on the district site or something like that. I think that could be really, really cool. And the kids that get to level 5, that's definitely icing on the cake at that point.
Right.
So I think that's really cool. So Melissa said, create a product that uses feedback. I think that could be good.
Yeah. Can I just put like, I can publish an informational report based off teacher and peer feedback?
Yes.
Okay.
I also think it's important for them to see like the process of writing is a continual one, right? Like so what you turned in might have gotten you an A or all your points, or I'm not going to get into all that, but it might have gotten you like done with the assignment, but could it be better? Here's some feedback, even though, you know, all of your components are there, what components could be stronger, what could be better. It's a constant process. And even for a first grader understanding that, teaching them how to give peer advice in peer editing and teaching them how to receive peer editing, I think is a huge skill they're going to be doing for the rest of their academic career. So I like this a lot. I'm getting really excited about your grid. I'm not going to lie.
And to kind of feed off of that, I think that when we talk about that peer editing, that's going to lead into that asking questions as well. Yes. Because when you give that peer feedback, you really have to know how to ask your questions in order to get the best feedback. So
yeah, like something like, what did the author or what did you mean when you said this or that?
So Calissa, I see your question. We haven't done it this year because of COVID, but we actually do publishing parties. So when we actually publish a piece of writing, we'll share with each other, and they get like popcorn and they get to move around and read each other's writing. And so
I love that idea. I absolutely love that. Daphne loves that idea too. So this is something that a lot of people think isn't possible in a self-paced classroom. I hear this all the time. Like, how do you do presentations? How do you do this thing? So one way to do it is you wait till you have a majority of your class ready to do it, and then you just do it on the after the grid's done or like at the end. Another thing I've seen student teachers do though is instead of doing them all at once, as students finish, give them a 5-minute little mini TED talk, right? Before class starts, and go, here's an exemplar. Here's what so-and-so did. And then everyone goes back to work on their grids, and you just have these little 5 or 10-minute like presentation periods at the beginning of, the last week of classes or something like that as kids finish some of these things. So there's plenty of ways to do some of this stuff. I just want to be super clear about that. And I see some great things happening in your classroom when I go there. So Daphne says that might motivate others. I agree. And it sets an exemplar for others' work. So they know the kind of, you can look at that feedback, discuss that feedback, and that could be even before they start level 5. That could even be the feedback they get before they start working on level 5. So they present and the whole class asks questions or gives them feedback on little scraps of paper or asks them questions about their informational text. Oh, this is getting so exciting. And like so many fun things that you could do with that. And I'm sure you'll pick a lot of cool things to do with that. So one thing that you do with your grids that if you guys were watching Amanda Post's grid development for her math grid, this is very similar. You do this thing where you list all your resources at the bottom. I love that brainstorming idea, okay? Yeah. I love it because they're all right there. They're top of mind, top of sight, and makes it really, really, really easy. So I just wanted to show everybody kind of your thought process. I don't know if you wanted everybody to see that, but I wanted everyone to see this. So to me, do you want to talk through any of these, or is this just kind of like a list of general things that you've done in the past or parts of your curriculum or ideas that you just have?
Well, we don't have a curriculum right now. We're getting one next year, but we've been balanced literacy. Well, I said this is year 18 for me. So for 18 years, we've been balanced literacy. So
real quick, can you tell us what balanced literacy is for anyone who doesn't know what that is, just so that they know what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, we don't have like a reading curriculum that we pull from. We do a reader's workshop and a writer's workshop, and we do word study. And we follow a lot of Lucy Calkins and a lot of Fontes and Pinnell, if you're familiar with them. But as a result of that, I've had to pull a lot of my own resources. So you can imagine after this many years of teaching, I've gathered a bunch. So basically what I did here is I just kind of went through things that I've used in the past. I went back through a lot of my resources, and I really just started listing things that I felt like would fit in my grid. And this kind of goes back to that I've really had to take a closer look at my standard, because a lot of resources that I've gathered, they're really just kind of fluff, and they're not necessarily focused on that specific standard. So this is like a list of things that I've pulled, resources that I have and have used that are actually, centered on my standard. Yeah, they're correlated. They're effective, but they're not just fluff. Fun.
Yeah.
Still fun, but
so here's something that I want everyone to highlight from what you just said. You have to vet your resources and curriculum. Get rid of the fluff, keep the fun, but make sure it's purposeful fun. Okay? Like, one of the biggest mistakes I think teachers make is they get so focused on, fun that they miss the point of what they're doing. And students end up having a lot of fun, but learning very little in those activities, right? And honestly, I've been in your classroom, Maggie. You have kids, this was pre-COVID, so forgive me if this isn't what it feels like right now, but you had kids playing games on the floor, kids working at the board, kids doing like games and cutouts and stuff at their desks. Your kids were having a blast in your classroom, and it was so much fun to watch. So like, those were all very targeted activities. It wasn't, even though they were having fun in a targeted way. So something the grid can really help most teachers do is hone in on what they're doing with their students and really kind of get to the meat of what they need to cover, so that even though they're doing fun things and multiple types of activities, which you should always have in your grid, you're really bearing down and focusing on those standards. So the next step we would normally take in this process, Maggie, as you know, would be talking through how would we assess like their ability to identify the main topic or retell key details. I think honestly, your standards, your targets articulate that pretty well themselves. We know what kind of questions you're going to be asking your students. So we're going to skip over some of those mastery question discussions, even though I know you've thought about them, because, sure, right. Wink, wink. And even though, I want everyone to think with those. And let's go into the types of activities we want to use for our level 1. So would you want to walk through what you already have, and then maybe we can kind of expand from there?
Yeah, so this box 1A, I really felt like we need to start with the basic understanding between fiction and nonfiction. Like, we cannot go anywhere with this grid if they don't understand.
Yeah, like what is an informational text versus not an informational text. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And we've gone over this. We've done this, but to bring it back to this grid, I wanted to just do a really quick review activity to make sure that they had that understanding. When I type out my grid, I do use words with my first graders instead of pictures, because when
Thank you, by the way. I love that. Thank you. I love that.
Well, if I start it and have that expectation at the beginning of the year, they really kind of live up to it. And they've learned, even if they can't read all the words, they know exactly what the important ones are. So they can pick
just to highlight, I just want to pause right here. Your students will rise, first graders or not, to the expectations and that we set for them. I just want to put that on a sign and wave it around all the time for every teacher I work with. Your students can if you believe they can. And if they need some extra help, that's okay. But I guarantee you, Maggie, by your 4th, 5th, 6th grid, they know what these words mean. They can do it. And you're still keeping it pretty simple, right? You're not going overboard with the wordiness. You're not writing paragraphs in your boxes. But absolutely, absolutely. And you could also differentiate pretty easily by putting little like signs in your room that have the word scissors with a picture of scissors next to it or something like that. You know what I mean? For some of those common words that they're going to see. So that'd be a way to differentiate and still include words with your grid. So thank you for saying that. That was like a little bonus for me to everybody, thanks to you. So I appreciate that. So
I know some people probably look at my grid and they think, first grade, can they really read that? And so I wanted to kind of explain.
So, and this is another good time to say that it's okay to stop and put this on the board in front of your class and go, hey guys, on 1A, you need to do this, right? Like this is what you need, so that you're sort of scaffolding that release of them to just individually just going off, right? Self-paced learning is not self-taught, people. Okay. Big bright letters. You can still help your kids. All right. You got me in a weird mood tonight, Maggie. I'm telling you, but it's good. It's good. This is good stuff. So walk us through what you have so far and what you're thinking you might want to add. And maybe I see some things say like whole group versus don't say that. Walk us through kind of how you organize those types of things and what those things mean to you and your students.
Okay, so 1A I did, it's a nonfiction, fiction sort, and it's just going to be a very simple like book cover. They have to sort whether it's a fiction or nonfiction text. And that's just for me to assess if they have that understanding of genre. And then 1B is just an introductory activity that I've done with Main Topic. So they have like paper bags with pictures in it, and then a scoot, if you don't know, they walk around the room to record. And
Sweet.
they have, yeah, and it still can be COVID friendly. So we still do a lot of scoots, but then they have to look in the bag and they have to figure out what would all of those pictures have in common. And they're really simple. They're like all art supplies, or
Sure, yeah.
all farm animals, or something very simple. And then 1C, I put whole group, because we still do whole group mini lessons, even though we have a grid. So everybody will do the sort, and everybody will do the Main Topic. And then I'm going to do my whole group mini lesson on Main Topic and details. And even though those are two separate targets, I still teach them together because they're intertwined. Like you can't, it's really hard to do one without the other.
Sure, because you need details to say what the main topic is.
Right.
Like you can't.
Exactly. And then for 1D, I left that blank because I want that to be an independent practice. And then 1E, I went back to whole group because then I want to teach text features whole group and make sure that everybody is hearing the same thing, same time. And then we'll move on to 1F with another independent practice.
So let me ask you, just for clarification, like if a student like didn't get to finish 1B and you did the whole group 1C lesson, could they still finish 1B?
Absolutely. So cool. I
knew the answer to that question. I just wanted you to say it. Okay. Just so we're both clear.
And I will skip boxes and check them off. So like if a child doesn't
because if you did it all together and they did the activity and it looks good and they got it, cool. Now go back to 1B because you're still working on that.
Exactly. Cool. So they might have 1A checked off, and then they might have 1C checked off, but they have to finish 1B before they can move up. And so
there you go. So Maggie just blew one of the biggest myths of mastery learning out of the water. You can do whole group mini lessons, right? You can have kids go back, and you don't have to wait for everybody to do that mini lesson. You can still have that experience with your students and then put them back right where they left off in your class. And because you're progress monitoring, you know where those kids are, so you can just put them right back where they were. So for everybody watching, even with first graders, I'm so glad you said that, because people are like, am I allowed to talk to my students? Yes, you are. You always can. You always will be able to do that. You can do whole group activities. Some teachers do those as many lessons outside of the grid, but this is a really good example of including those things inside your grid. And I love that you do that. That is such a cool way to kind of document that they've done that, right? And where they're at in that process. So that's absolutely fantastic. So many cool things. So something that's sticking out to me about your activities, and I really we're going to move on from level 1 because we got 3 minutes. So we're going to talk through the other levels really quick. But one thing I love is any elementary teacher looking at these might be thinking, I do a station like that, or I've done a center like that, or I've done an activity like that for my students. And I'd like to get your thoughts on all this does is it organizes it in a different, more structured way so that it's student-led as opposed to being teacher-forced or teacher-driven, right? Because and that's something that both you and Amanda, since I've known you, have done an amazing job with, right? When I walk into your classroom, Maggie, it feels like a vibrant, excited, energy-filled classroom with lots of things going on, but the level of engagement is huge, and I absolutely love it. It's what any elementary teacher would want to feel in their classroom, right? So I think a lot of people get scared of this because they're like, I do centers, I do stations, I don't know if this is going to work. And I'm sitting here telling everybody, it can work, and
Mhm.
you are proof of that. So any elementary teachers, like, hit Maggie up if you have questions. I will gladly answer your questions too, but it is possible. You can do this, I promise. And it works beautifully. So real quick, we have a couple minutes here. We're gonna go a little bit over time, if that's okay. I apologize. So what are the types of things you're thinking for level 2? Just kind of talk through some of the different types of activities you might have your students do on level 2, and then maybe level 3 really quickly. It doesn't have to be specific, just a couple examples would probably be fine.
So one thing that's important to me is that because first graders, they cannot read independently most texts, I want them to be able to access the same text in level 2 that we accessed in level 1. So
very cool.
texts that we used in level 1 that I used in whole group, I'm going to actually recycle those up into level 2. And I might have a recording of me reading it. If it's probably an easier book, I would have that available for them. So then we're just going to look at it in with a different eye. So I will use the same text, but now I'm going to present questions, and we might do it in a Scoot format where they get up and move around the room, or like a text feature scavenger hunt where they have to find stuff in that book.
I love that you just said that, okay? Because that is what scaffolded, universally designed, differentiated instruction looks like. That is so amazing. You are a rock star, okay? And another thing, just real quick, I want everyone to notice what she just said. She doesn't even realize how awesome what she just said is, because she literally is reusing the text that she did on level 1 because she's asking higher level DOK questions about that text. So if you're asking a higher level question, you can use the same text, and your students are going to be able to approach and use that text more effectively. So that is brilliant, and I love you for it. That was absolutely fantastic.
Well, that definitely came from trial and error. I will admit there were definitely mistakes made along the way.
Yeah, so we already talked a little bit about what they're going to be doing in level 4. So let's talk about level 3 before we tie things up here.
Yeah, I think, so I'll be honest.
Go ahead.
I'll be honest, this is kind of a difficult standard for me because we're such a lower level text that sometimes it's hard to find those connections. But what I'd really like for them to do is, so like if we have a text about ocean animals, I really want them to be able to take a look at, okay, this ocean animal, how is the shark compared to the pufferfish or whatever?
Sure.
So I want them to be able to see, like, one's a predator and the other's the prey, or maybe this type of shark, is dangerous to humans and this shark is not dangerous to humans. And so really being able to hone in on those details in that way. And then
absolutely.
And I really think it's important, like we learn about this shark in the caption of this photograph, but what does it say in the table? What kind of information is being presented in both of those text features?
Absolutely. So different types of tasks that are forcing them to focus on different aspects of the texts, and then talk and really focus on those pieces. I love this grid. I'm excited to see you continue working on it, Maggie. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that? If they're like, Maggie was so awesome, I have to ask her more questions. First of all, is that okay if they reach out? And if that's okay, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Absolutely. I am on Twitter and on Instagram with my at Gifford M621 right there. And if you want to connect with me, DM me. I'd be glad to give you my email address. And I can share great examples. We can talk through one. Absolutely.
That is awesome. You did such an amazing job. if you are watching right now, I want to see a ton of green hearts for Maggie for putting herself out there, talking through a first grade read grid. Come on, that's awesome. So many of you said it couldn't be done or didn't think it could be done. Well, right here is proof that it's being done every single day. I've seen it with my own eyes, and she lives it every single day. So, Maggie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing, and just thanks for being awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Hi, Amanda. I didn't get to say hi to you yet. I see you.
So everyone have a fantastic night. That was Building an Elementary Reading Grid with Maggie Gifford live. Have a fantastic night. Stay awesome, everyone.